Ever wonder what keeps those massive ships, you know, afloat? What keeps them from just, well, sinking?
Right.
Today we're doing a deep dive into vessel assembly inspection.
Yeah.
And to help us navigate these waters, we've got some insights from RoleCatcher, this really cool platform using like cutting-edge tech to change how people find jobs.
It's like having a career Swiss Army knife right at your fingertips.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when most people think of ships, they probably picture the captain, the open ocean, all
Yeah,
that.
the romance of it all.
Exactly. But they rarely think about the folks who make sure those ships are actually seaworthy.
It's so true. It's easy to forget about the meticulous work of these inspectors, but without them, those vessels wouldn't even leave the dock.
And it's easy to assume it's just a quick once-over, right?
Yeah.
Like, yep, looks good to me, set sail.
Right. Just a quick look-see.
But RoleCatcher's career guide, it paints a very different picture. It's way more intricate, way more important than most people realize.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about checking for a little rust here or a loose bolt there.
Right, this is serious business.
These inspectors are like guardians of the blueprints, making absolutely sure that the vessel is built exactly to those engineering specs.
Okay, so we're not talking about a little toy boat here. These are massive structures. What kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, they use the basics, sure, like your magnifying glass and tape measure.
Right.
But it goes way beyond that.
Okay.
Think calipers for those super precise measurements, micrometers to make sure even the tiniest parts are the right size, the right tolerance.
Wow.
And get this, they even use ultrasonic testing.
Ultrasonic testing on a ship.
Yeah. They can actually find like microscopic flaws hidden within the ship's structure, things the naked eye would totally miss.
That's incredible. So we're talking high-tech stuff here.
But I have a question, and maybe this is my own misconception, but I always pictured inspectors being there at the very end. You know, like they give the final thumbs up. Yep, she's good to go. That's a common misconception. But actually, RoleCatcher emphasizes that these inspectors, they're involved during the entire construction process, from the moment those massive steel plates show up at the shipyard.
Really? Wow.
They're checking the welds as they happen, they're inspecting the engine room, down to the tiniest detail.
Oh, wow.
Making sure absolutely everything aligns with those strict, and I mean strict, safety regulations from the International Maritime Organization.
Right, because those are the rules of the sea, right? The ones that keep everything from, descending into chaos.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's a cool job, definitely, but it's also absolutely vital for global trade.
It's a really good point. I never thought of it like that. So it's not just the cool factor, it's the global impact.
It's both.
So RoleCatcher also mentions that these inspectors are working on docks, maybe even during sea trials.
Uh-huh.
That sounds pretty intense, honestly.
Yeah.
Not for the faint of heart.
You got that right. We're talking tight spaces, working at extreme heights, dealing with all kinds of crazy weather conditions. It's definitely physically demanding, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But here's where it gets interesting, and this is what I think is really cool. RoleCatcher highlights how much automation and AI are changing the field of vessel assembly inspection.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They talked about how algorithms are now being used to analyze all that inspection data.
Exactly.
So instead of just having human eyes on every single weld,
Yeah.
every single component, you've got computers flagging potential issues before they even become, real problems.
Right, and think about it. Faster, more efficient inspections, that means ships are built quicker, they're back on the water quicker, which is good for business.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
But it does make you wonder, what happens to the human element in all of this?
That's exactly what I was thinking. And the really cool thing about RoleCatcher is they present both sides of that coin. The exciting possibilities and the potential downsides. They don't shy away from the tough stuff.
Absolutely. They lay it all out there, the pros and the cons, which is what anyone considering this career needs to know. You got to know what you're getting into.
For sure. So let's talk about those pros and cons. What are some of the biggest perks of being a vessel assembly inspector, besides getting to say you have the coolest job at a party?
Well, I mean, job security is a big one, according to RoleCatcher, that is.
Makes sense.
The seas aren't going anywhere, right? And neither is the need for qualified inspectors to make sure those ships are safe. Plus, you're talking about a specialized skill set. Not just anyone can do this, and that usually means good pay.
And I bet there's a real sense of satisfaction knowing that you're directly impacting something as massive as a ship, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're contributing to global trade, transportation, even national security in some cases.
Right.
It's not your average desk job. You're actually building something, or at least making sure it's built right.
Right. Okay, so those are some pretty compelling perks. But, of course, there are two sides to every coin. What about the challenges that RoleCatcher mentioned?
Well, they're very upfront about the fact that the work can get, a little repetitive at times.
Yeah.
You're inspecting weld after weld. You're meticulously measuring the same components over and over again. It's not for everyone.
Right. It takes a certain personality type to find that kind of work satisfying.
Exactly. And then there's the pressure of those strict quality control standards.
Because there's no room for error when you're dealing with people's lives, right?
Exactly. You can't just shrug and say, oops.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you got to be able to handle pressure, scrutiny, knowing that your work has huge implications.
So it's not unique to this field.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of skilled trades have that pressure, right?
For sure. But what I think makes vessel assembly inspection unique is the blend of traditional craftsmanship and this like cutting edge technology. You need that deep understanding of shipbuilding fundamentals, how things have always been done, but you also need to be comfortable with all those sophisticated instruments we talked about. You have to speak both languages.
It's like this perfect blend of old and new, which probably appeals to a certain type of person, like you said. Someone who appreciates both the art and the science of it all.
Exactly. And speaking of different types of people, RoleCatcher actually does a great job of mapping out the career stages for people who are interested in becoming inspectors. They don't just give you this generic job description. They show you the different paths you can take, the different levels you can reach.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's break that down a little bit. Let's say someone's totally new to this field. They're just starting out.
Okay.
What does that entry-level experience look like? What can they expect?
Well, according to RoleCatcher, you'd probably start as a junior inspector, often working under the supervision of someone more experienced, someone who's been there, done that.
Right. Makes sense.
So you're learning the ropes, you're getting familiar with all the tools, probably doing more of those repetitive tasks at first, just to, to build up your skills.
Yeah, paying your dues.
Exactly.
Getting your hands dirty, literally.
Exactly.
So you start as a junior inspector, but what's the trajectory look like? Is there room to climb the ladder, so to speak?
Absolutely. RoleCatcher's Guide, it shows that after a few years of experience, you could move into a lead role.
Okay.
You could be supervising a team of inspectors, maybe focusing on a specific part of a vessel, a specific stage of the construction process.
So more responsibility, more complex projects. That sounds like a good challenge for someone who's ready to, step it up.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about someone who's really ambitious? Someone who's aiming for those, top-level positions. What does the peak of this career path look like, according to RoleCatcher?
Well, they point to quality assurance roles as being like the end game for a lot of inspectors.
Okay, quality assurance. What does that actually mean in this context?
So, imagine this. You're overseeing the entire inspection process for a shipyard.
Wow.
You're the one making sure that every single vessel that leaves that yard meets those super strict international standards we talked about.
So the buck stops with you, basically.
Pretty much. It's a huge responsibility. You need that technical expertise for sure, but you also need strong leadership skills. You got to know how to communicate effectively to motivate your team.
So you're not just responsible for catching defects. You're responsible for setting the bar for quality across the board.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing, getting to that level takes more than just, showing up on time and doing your job right.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that RoleCatcher really, really emphasizes, the importance of never stopping learning, of continuous learning in this field.
Which makes sense, because the shipbuilding industry, it's constantly evolving, right? New technologies, new materials popping up all the time. You got to be a pretty dedicated student to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. They drive that point home throughout the guide, the need to stay updated on new welding techniques, new inspection methods, the latest safety regulations. This isn't a career for someone who wants to learn one thing and then just do it the same way for 30 years.
Right. You got to be adaptable, willing to embrace those new challenges, new technologies, or you'll get left behind.
100%. And you know what? That's something that applies to pretty much any career these days, don't you think?
Totally. It's like we're all students, again, constantly taking courses,
Yeah.
going to workshops, reading the latest research, just to keep our skills sharp.
It's true. It's like we're all back in school, but the classroom is the world.
Exactly. And you know what else I find interesting about this whole thing? We're talking about vessel assembly inspection, right?
Right.
A very specific career path. But the things we're uncovering, these insights, these trends, they apply way beyond just, shipbuilding.
100% agree. And that's what I think makes these deep dives so valuable. We're exploring a specific field, but the takeaways are often much broader, much more widely applicable.
I totally agree. Okay, so we have established that a career in vessel assembly inspection is way more complex, way more interesting than it might seem on the
Totally,
surface.
for sure.
But before we dive even deeper, I want to circle back to RoleCatcher for a second. One thing that stood out to me was their focus on not just finding a job, but actually excelling in your career.
Right.
They're going above and beyond just matching resumes with job postings.
Right. And I think that's where their use of technology is really interesting, really innovative. They're not just about getting your foot in the door. They want to give you the tools, the resources, the insights you need to actually thrive, to stand out in a really competitive job market.
Absolutely. And one of the tools they offer that really caught my attention was their AI-powered interview practice platform. Have you ever heard of anything like that before?
It's definitely cutting edge stuff. Instead of just, practicing your answers in the mirror or with a friend, you can actually record yourself answering common interview questions.
Oh, wow.
And then, get this, the AI analyzes your performance, your delivery, everything, and gives you personalized feedback.
Wow. I can only imagine how valuable that would be, especially for someone who gets nervous during interviews. That instant feedback on your body language, your tone, even the content of your answers. It's like having a personal interview coach right there with you. Have you ever used a tool like that?
I haven't personally, but I can see how helpful it would be, especially for those high stakes interviews where you really got to bring your A game.
Right. It's like having a secret weapon.
Hmm.
But you know what else is interesting about RoleCatcher's approach? They don't just focus on the technical skills. They highlight those, what do they call them, soft skills, right?
Yeah, the soft skills.
Yeah.
And they're just as important, if not more important in a lot of ways. We're talking about things like communication, teamwork, problem solving, all that good stuff. Those are essential in any field, but especially in an environment like shipbuilding, where collaboration is key. You're not just working independently.
Right. You've got engineers, welders, project managers, all these different people you have to be able to communicate with.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher does a great job of emphasizing that, the importance of clear, concise communication, both when you're speaking and when you're writing.
Because a brilliant inspector who can't explain their findings in a way that, everyone understands, they're not going to be very effective, right?
Exactly. You got to be able to get your point across. Those detailed inspection reports, knowing how to articulate potential problems and solutions, those are crucial skills.
Absolutely. And, it's not even just about identifying the issues. It's about understanding how they fit into the bigger picture.
Exactly. You have to be able to connect the dots to see how your individual tasks, your decisions, impact the overall project, the timeline, the budget, everything.
So you need that big picture thinking, right? It's not just about the individual weld or the specific component. It's about understanding how all those pieces come together to make a safe, seaworthy vessel.
Exactly. And to do that well, you need critical thinking skills. You need to be a good problem solver. And you know what? Sometimes you even need a little bit of creativity. You might run into some unexpected challenges, a design flaw, a last-minute change, and you got to be able to think on your feet to come up with solutions.
It's like you're a detective in a way, searching for clues to make sure that ship is safe to set sail.
That is a great analogy. And just like a good detective, a good vessel assembly inspector, they've got a keen eye for detail, a healthy dose of skepticism, and that ability to, like you said, connect the dots and prevent potential disasters from happening.
And that brings us back to the core of what we're talking about, the absolutely essential role that these vessel assembly inspectors play. They're not just making sure a ship floats, they're ensuring the safety of everyone and everything on board.
Absolutely. They're protecting the people who build these ships, the people who sail on them, and ensuring the goods that are transported actually reach their destinations. It's a huge responsibility, but it also comes with the potential for incredible job satisfaction.
No doubt about it. And it's a career path that's only going to become more important, more vital, as the shipping industry continues to grow and evolve in the years to come.
I totally agree.
Now, this brings us to a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days. With all the talk about automation and AI, how will these technologies impact jobs like vessel assembly inspection in the future? Will robots eventually replace human inspectors?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something we'll definitely be digging into more in our next segment.
Stay tuned.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Right.
let's take a closer look at some of the specific tasks and responsibilities that fall under this umbrella of vessel assembly inspection. Because let's be real, understanding what these inspectors do on a daily basis That's crucial for anyone who's actually thinking about this as a career.
I couldn't agree more. So let's dive into those nitty-gritty details. What does a typical workday look like for a vessel assembly inspector?
Well, it really depends, right? It depends on your experience level, the kind of project you're working on, the type of vessel, everything.
Of course, of course.
But generally speaking, they're responsible for a whole range of tasks, from the very hands-on, like visually inspecting welds and components, to using all that specialized equipment to detect those hidden flaws we talked about. They might be crawling through tight spaces one minute, climbing scaffolding the next, and then reviewing technical drawings, back in the office.
So it's a dynamic job, got to be physically fit, but also mentally sharp.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's paint a picture here. Say you're a brand new inspector, fresh out of training, first day on the job. What are some of the things you might actually be doing?
Well, you'd probably be paired up with a more seasoned inspector, someone who can show you the ropes, guide you through the process. You'd probably start with some of the more basic tasks, visually inspecting welds, looking for obvious defect, like cracks, porosity, undercuts, things like that.
So a lot of observation, attention to detail right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. Those early days are all about developing that keen eye for spotting inconsistencies and understanding why it's so important to document everything meticulously.
Right, and those reports are crucial, right? I mean, they're essential for communication and accountability throughout the entire shipbuilding process.
Exactly. They provide this historical record of the inspection process, so other team members, the engineers, the project managers, they can understand the condition of the vessel, they can track repairs, see what modifications were made. Everything's documented.
So it's like a paper trail, making sure that everyone's on the same page and that nothing slips through the cracks.
Precisely.
That's really interesting. And I imagine as you gain more experience, you start taking on more responsibility, right? You move beyond just the basic visual inspections to the more complex tasks using some of that specialized equipment we talked about.
Exactly, like those ultrasonic testing devices. You might learn how to use those to find those internal flaws in welds or materials that you wouldn't be able to see just by looking at them.
Oh, wow.
Or magnetic particle testing, that's another one.
Wow.
That's for identifying surface cracks. These are just a couple examples of the many specialized skills that inspectors learn as they progress in their careers.
It's really amazing to think about the level of expertise that goes into ensuring that these vessels are structurally sound. It's like a whole hidden world that most people never even consider. But it's so vital. It impacts global trade, the economy, how we live our lives. It's incredible.
I know, and that's what I find so fascinating about this whole field. It's this blend of technical precision, critical thinking, a deep, deep understanding of how things work, but it also requires strong communication skills. You got to be a team player, and you have to be committed to lifelong learning.
You got to have it all.
You really do.
It's the whole package. Well, on that note, why don't we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors? And when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the world of vessel assembly inspection. We'll explore the challenges, the rewards, the career paths, everything you need to know. Stay with us. All right, so we're back and ready to, really get into the nuts and bolts of vessel assembly inspection.
Right into the heart of it.
Exactly. Before the break, we were talking about what these inspectors actually DO, day in and day out.
And it's not all, sunshine and smooth sailing.
Right. It sounds like there are definitely challenges.
But those challenges, they come with a real sense of accomplishment. Like, can you imagine the feeling of looking at this massive seaworthy vessel, knowing that your inspections, your attention to detail, played a part in making it safe, making it reliable?
Right. Like you had a hand in making sure that thing could handle whatever the ocean throws at it.
Exactly. You're practically a guardian of the seas.
I love it. But RoleCatcher also mentioned that it's not just about, inspecting those physical components. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of reporting involved too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those inspection reports, they are essential. They basically provide this permanent record of the vessel's condition, tracking any issues that were found, the repairs that were made, and what standards were met. It's all about accountability, making sure everything's transparent.
So you're not just working with your hands, you're not just using your eyes, you're a skilled communicator too. What kind of things would you actually find in one of those reports?
Well, they can get pretty detailed, I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
You'd have the date, the time, the exact location of the inspection, a list of all the components that were checked, and I'm talking everything. You'd have specific measurements, notes on anything that deviated from the engineering specs, recommendations for how to fix any problems. It's like a detective's case file.
Wow, so you're building up this whole history of the vessel's construction or repair, right? That's really interesting. So those reports, they're crucial for making sure everyone's on the same page, from the folks actually building the ship to the regulatory bodies, the ones making sure everyone's following those safety standards.
Exactly. And that brings us back to those international regulations we talked about earlier, those really strict ones.
Yep.
Vessel assembly inspectors, they're not just making sure a ship can, float. They're making sure it meets these super high standards for safety and environmental compliance. These are the rules that help prevent accidents. They protect marine life. They keep the whole shipping industry running smoothly on this global scale.
It's amazing how much impact their work has. It's not just about one ship. It's about this whole interconnected system.
It really is. And that global perspective, that's something RoleCatcher actually highlights as a potential perk of this job.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, depending on who you work for, the specific projects you're on, there might be some opportunities for travel, working in different parts of the world.
Okay, now that sounds exciting.
Right. So imagine this. You could be inspecting this massive tanker being built in, South Korea.
Yeah.
Or you could be overseeing repairs on a cruise ship in the Bahamas.
Okay, now that's the glamorous side of vessel assembly inspection I think a lot of people picture.
Right.
But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
Those opportunities probably don't come along every day, right?
Probably not, no.
What about the day-to-day reality for most inspectors? Where are they actually spending their time?
Well, RoleCatcher really emphasizes that the work environment for this job, it can vary a lot.
Okay.
You could be in a bustling shipyard, surrounded by activity, climbing all over this massive vessel under construction.
Yeah.
Or you might be in a more controlled setting, like a dry dock where the ship's been lifted out of the water for repairs.
So you'd be indoors, outdoors, dealing with all kinds of weather, all kinds of environments. It sounds like you need to be pretty adaptable, have some physical stamina to really thrive in this field.
Oh, for sure. You got to be comfortable in environments that can be noisy, cramped, physically demanding. You might be working at heights, in confined spaces, around heavy machinery. It's not a job for someone who wants to sit at a desk all day.
Right. You got to be able to, get your hands dirty. But it sounds like it would really appeal to someone who likes that kind of work, who likes to solve problems in a hands-on way, a real-world way.
Exactly.
You're building something.
You are. And for those who are into technology, there's that whole increasing role of automation and AI we were talking about.
Right.
Imagine using drones, right? Drones with high-resolution cameras to inspect parts of a ship that are really difficult for a person to reach, or even dangerous.
That makes so much sense. Like, why risk a person's safety when you can send a drone in, right?
Exactly.
But I have to ask, what does that mean for the future of, the human inspectors? Are those jobs, are they in jeopardy?
That's a question a lot of people are asking, and not just in shipbuilding.
Right.
I mean, it's across so many industries right now, and it's something that RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from. They're very upfront about the fact that the role of a vessel assembly inspector, it's going to change. It's going to evolve in the coming years.
So instead of thinking about it as, robots are taking over, it's more like these technologies are going to change how the job is done.
Exactly. It's going to be more about humans and technology working together, collaborating.
Okay. So instead of replacing humans, the AI and the automation, it'll actually enhance what they can do.
Exactly.
So give me an example. How would that work in this case?
Well, let's say you've got thousands of images of welds from those drones we were talking about.
Okay.
The AI can analyze those images way faster than a human, right? They can flag any potential defects.
Right.
But then the human inspector steps in. They're the ones who can actually look at those flagged areas and say, okay, this is actually a problem, or this is nothing to worry about. They're using their experience, their judgment, their knowledge.
So it frees up the human inspectors to focus on the things that require that human touch, that critical thinking that a computer just can't replicate, at least not yet.
Exactly.
So maybe these technologies, they're not eliminating jobs, but they are changing the skills that are needed.
Right. And that's where the importance of lifelong learning comes in again. The inspectors who are going to thrive in this evolving landscape, they're going to be the ones who are constantly learning new things, adapting to these new technologies, always trying to stay one step ahead.
It's like that saying, adapt or become obsolete.
100%.
Which, when you really think about it, that's true for so many professions these days.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about shipbuilding anymore.
Nope. It's everywhere.
It's about being adaptable, being open to new ways of doing things.
That's the name of the game.
Okay, so we've talked about the technology, but let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something a little more, personal. RoleCatcher mentioned that this career path, it often attracts a certain type of person, that certain personality traits and aptitudes might mean you'd be a good fit for this kind of work. What are some of the things they highlighted?
Well, we already touched on a few, right? You got to have that really sharp attention to detail. You need to be a methodical problem solver, and you got to be okay with working in environments that are, sometimes challenging.
Right. Not afraid to get your hands dirty.
Exactly. But I think beyond that, and this is something they emphasized, a genuine curiosity about how things work, that's essential. You can't just be someone who checks boxes on a list. You have to want to understand the why behind the what.
So not just going through the motions, but really wanting to get in there, figure things out.
Exactly. A good vessel assembly inspector, they're not just there to punch a clock. They're asking questions, they're challenging assumptions, they're looking for ways to improve the process, to make things even better.
So they're problem solvers at their core. They're driven by this desire to get it right, to make sure that structure is safe.
100%. And you know what else?
What's that?
I think you need a certain level of personal integrity to really succeed in this line of work.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. You're the one responsible for making sure those ships meet those really high standards we talked about, right? The quality standards, the safety standards.
Right.
And sometimes you're under pressure. There are deadlines to meet, budgets to stick to. You might encounter situations where there's pressure to cut corners, to look the other way, and you have to be able to say no. You have to be able to stand by your work, your convictions.
So it's not just about having the technical know-how. It's about having that moral compass, that commitment to doing things the right way, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's easy to overlook when we talk about careers. It's not just about finding a job that pays the bills. It's about finding work that you believe in, work that you're proud of, work that gives you that sense of purpose.
That's such an important point. And speaking of purpose, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored all these different aspects of vessel assembly inspection, the technical side, the communication, the technology, the personality traits.
It's been a deep dive for sure.
It really has. But before we wrap things up completely, I want to take a second to just acknowledge the human element that's at the heart of all of this.
I like that.
It's so easy to get caught up in the details, the technical stuff, the regulations, and forget that behind all of it, behind every inspection, every weld, every single report, there's a person. There are people, real people, with families, dreams, and a passion for what they do.
That's so important to remember.
These are the unsung heroes, the ones who are making sure that our ships are safe, that our goods get where they need to go, that our economies can thrive.
And they do it all with this incredible level of precision, dedication, and, integrity that I think deserves a lot more respect and appreciation than they often get.
I couldn't agree more. Now, before we move on to our final thoughts, let's take another quick break to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back to wrap up this deep dive into the amazing world of vessel assembly inspection. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into vessel assembly inspection. We've talked about the skills, the challenges, even what kind of person might thrive in this line of work. But we always like to leave our listeners with something to, chew on, something to think about.
Absolutely. And we've touched on how technology is changing things, but what does that really mean for someone considering this career? Or, frankly, any skilled trade these days?
Right. It's easy to hear automation, robots, all that, and think, well, there goes another job.
Yeah.
But RoleCatcher, they present a more hopeful outlook, I guess. It's not just about replacement. It's about how the work itself changes.
Exactly. Remember those ultrasonic testing devices we talked about? Those things don't just, magically interpret themselves. Someone has to look at that data, understand what it means, make judgment calls. A computer can't do that, not entirely. Not yet, anyway.
So it's not robots taking jobs. It's more like workers needing to keep learning new things. Their skills have to evolve along with the technology.
Precisely. Think about it. The shipbuilders from 100 years ago, they couldn't have imagined the kinds of massive ships being built today, the complex welding, the computer programs they use now. But those new skills, they're built on top of what came before. It's all connected.
So adaptability is key. Being a lifelong learner, not seeing a new machine as a threat, but as a tool to master.
Exactly. And honestly, that's true whether you're inspecting welds or managing a team or running a bakery, whatever. This idea of humans and technology working together, that's the future no matter what you do.
It's like we charted a course from the depths of a ship's engine room
Right.
all the way to, like, the forefront of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's been a fascinating journey. We've explored a career, sure, but also a glimpse into how the world is changing right before our eyes. And I think for anyone listening who's curious about that, about these big forces shaping the future, well, this conversation gives them a lot to think about.
I completely agree. So next time you see a ship out on the water, remember those folks we talked about, the vessel assembly inspectors? They're working behind the scenes, often literally, to keep those ships afloat, to keep our goods moving, to keep the world running.
It's a vital job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you go about your day, think about this. How can you embrace lifelong learning? How can you become a master of the tools that are shaping your future? That's something we can all ask ourselves no matter what we do.
I like that. A great question to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring with you. Until next time.